Okay, looks like we are live everywhere. Mark,
yeah, sorry. Just catching up on the latest edition of Heave magazine.
Is that with some crumb?
I got that from Henry Ford from the car. They used to have one in every compartment.
Compartment. Okay. Well, good. Happy reading. Today we will not be talking about a heave, though, right?
Wait, what happened to your commercial?
What happened to the commercial? The commercial is Friday.
Oh, okay. Fridays only. Gotcha.
So I'm bring reading material to ignore the commercial on Friday.
No, I thought you were going to do a commercial. I thought I'd take a break and catch up.
It's like, hey, you have a commercial. I got to run to the restroom. Let's play the commercial.
Right. Well, I don't mind a commercial. If I can get a restroom break during the commercial, I'll support that advertiser.
All right. So today we are discussing the 25th president. Right.
25. Yeah, that's interesting. One of the 4 assassinated presidents, right, Eric? Or
yeah, that's
Garfield, Lincoln. I think if Todd Lincoln had lived long enough, he would have been in Dallas in '63. But I guess he's at every one of these things. Todd Lincoln. He never misses an assassination in his own lifetime. But
wait a minute, he was at McKinley too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was there too, my friend. Yep. How to get there. We'll get into it, but I don't know. Todd Lincoln's not really part of the story, but I just remembered that he was at all 3 of those assassinations.
And I know the other story is that his life was rescued by John Wilkes Booth's brother.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he was falling like in a train car and somebody snatched him.
Oh, right.
Before he fell to his death.
Right.
And that was John Wilkes Booth's brother. So the dude is just magnet to
So,
all
like
this.
Robert Oswald saved LBJ's mother from splitting her pants on a dance number in Dallas. The connection is really bizarre. But let's get on with McKinley, who I find to be fascinating, known as the Major during the Civil War. I mean, he's from Ohio, and I think he's born in like 1843, roughly. So 63, he's 20. He becomes a major of, I don't know what the name of the regiment is out of Ohio, but he is in an obscure battle called the Battle of Antietam, Eric, which has the highest casualty rate in one day. Yeah. So he saw a lot of action, McKinley.
That's so weird because for some reason, I place him on the 20th century, even though he barely made it into the 20th century.
I know. That's why I said that. Yeah.
I have trouble, associating the Civil War with Teddy Roosevelt, William McKinley. So that's kind of wild.
Well, it's definitely McKinley is associated because he becomes a general later afterwards, but he's a major in the field and he is busy killing Rebs. So that's how he made his bones. He becomes a congressman from Ohio, and eventually works his way up the ladder, to become governor of Ohio, of all things. He literally takes the entire train ride: war hero, congressman, governor, president of the United States.
That's a pretty reliable path,
right? And also Ohio being the center of all this activity. Now, I mean, McKinley as a campaigner, it's kind of interesting. McKinley, when he's running for president, has a basement strategy, not unlike a recent campaign. He does not go out on the stump, has everyone just come to him on his porch, where he holds these bull sessions on his porch in Ohio, and never goes out, never goes on the stump. And the reason he doesn't go on the stump is 2 things. He's really fat. He's like 5 foot. He's like 5'6" high and 5'6" wide is the joke. And he dresses like he gets dressed up every goddamn day. This guy, I guess, to offset this, the slovenliness of his look. He dresses to the nines all the time, but he doesn't go out on the stump, and he's up against the greatest orator in American political history. That's William Jennings Bryan.
I was wondering about that. Who would tour around, and he did the train stop tours, didn't he?
He did every stop. William Jennings Bryan spoke everywhere, every place, every time. One of the greatest orators. And he says, I can't compete with him. So I am not going to go toe to toe with him, orator versus orator. He says, I don't have those skills. And indeed, he didn't. And he did not debate him. He didn't go on a stump with him. Now, William Jennings Bryan, interestingly enough, because we're getting into the assassination of McKinley with a Iverson handgun, which was used also in the killing of RFK's father, RFK Sr. Right. So the Iverson gun, although that was a 22 that Sirhan allegedly fired, this gun is a 32, but it's also an Iverson, very similar looking gun.
I'm guessing they're not going to put it on their ad campaign.
Well, I don't know what their ad campaign is, but the gun is in the Buffalo Museum of History, the gun itself. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But the reality of it is that William Bryan is the hypnotist and therapist allegedly linked. The grandson of William Jennings Bryan is the one who is the Jolly West in the Sirhan case in the 1960s. Which we go over in, people want to look at our Sirhan episode, you will see a segment about William Bryan, who is the great grandson of William Jennings Bryan, who runs against McKinley and is tangentially linked to the assassination of McKinley.
Did they change his last name? Because I know it's Bryan without.
Yeah, they're both Bryan. They're both Bryan.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I thought it was Bryant.
No, it's both Bryan.
Okay.
Anyway, so this guy McKinley wins the election by a good amount of electoral votes, but the popular vote is super close. And what hinges on the election, one of the main themes is, for reasons I don't understand, which we're going to get into, he wanted to switch. This is Bryan wanted to switch to the silver standard as opposed to the gold standard. And also, they were in the middle of this era in 1896, where the industrial age was coming to bear, Eric, and factories were operating at 100% day and night because they had. This is really hard to explain because it makes no economic sense. They believed that once you got your factory running, even if you have no orders for anything, you just crank them out. You got no orders for cars? Who cares? Just keep cranking them out. No orders for chairs? Keep making them. They felt it was more expensive and more devastating to shut down the factory, lay people off, than to keep making crap, even though you didn't have the orders. So what happens is the complete collapse of the market and the economy in 1893, which was worse than the Great Depression, according to experts about the 1893 crash. And the market was flooded with cheap products that kept dropping in price. This is the opposite of what we have today. Every single thing was like 2 cents. You could buy a chair for 2 cents. You could buy a house for $3. Every single thing, because they mass produced and did not, I'm going to get to the reason for this. They mass produced and overrun the factories because they had so many natural resources and so much cheap labor and so much immigrant labor that they ran the factories at 100% efficiency, nonstop, day in, day out for 6 to 7 days a week. Okay, what does that lead to? Tons and tons of crap being made all over the place. A glut of crap. Now, what don't you have to get rid of the glut of crap? Markets. That's why they went after international markets. That's why they went after the Philippines. That's why they went after China. That's where American imperialism comes from. It comes from this glut of products that nobody can sell because every person in the country is now having products that are recently being invented. Dishwashers, cars, lamps, electricity is being put in. People are just inundated with these magical products in the 1890s, Eric, that never existed before in the American home. And they're cheap as F. Everybody gets a Sears catalog. This stuff is like so cheap that everybody can get all this electric brooms, a vacuum cleaner. It's like $3. All right, let's get one. And that's because the factories crank stuff out. So there begins to begin pressure to build markets that are overseas that we can control. And one of the weak links that's still out there is the fading Spanish Empire, Eric, that now has some remnants in the Western Hemisphere that it can no longer huff and puff and hold on to. That includes Cuba, that includes Puerto Rico, that includes the entire Philippines, that includes Guam, and everything else in between. Okay? Reason I'm explaining this is because this will lead to the Spanish-American War. This will lead to Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, the Battle of San Juan Hill. This will eventually lead to the assassination of William McKinley, because this was the beef with the anarchists, that we became an imperialist country. And believe me, the country was split on this. The political body was split. This treaty that he signs with Spain barely passes by the hair on your chinny chin chin to acquire, quote unquote, the territorial remnants of Spain, i.e. Cuba, i.e. the Philippines. And people don't want them. People listening to George Washington, and saying, why are we going out and acquiring these territories, Eric? And we set this whole thing up and leads to the sinking of the Maine, which is, remember the Maine and all that stuff. It's really fascinating because McKinley with Roosevelt is the bridge into the 20th century America, and eventually, like you said, eventually be the bridge into 21st century and 20th century America and the modernization of America. McKinley is the last of the royal presidents, the king-like presidents. He would walk out the door of the White House, go for a stroll, nobody knew where the hell he was. Okay? He would just disappear. And not that he was a drunk or a belligerent or anything. It was just a confidence. Despite the assassinations of two presidents, he still did not have around-the-clock Secret Service protection. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. It's not till Teddy Roosevelt gets in there where Roosevelt says, hey, I don't care what you're doing. I want protection. And they pass legislation about Secret Service, mandatorily guarding the president. But that's the three presidents get killed before this happens. That's how stupid we are. So he wins the election against William Jennings Bryan and becomes president. And in there begins to these drumbeats of imperialism begin to happen. Okay, so what happens is there's insurrections in Cuba against the Spanish government. There's insurrections in the Philippines against the Spanish government, but not enormous. So we're debating whether to, secretly back the rebels, Hunley. You know what I mean? Like in the Philippines, secretly back them, and then do the same thing in Cuba until we can get the Spanish government out of there. That's our plan. Okay. So the explosion of the Maine ship, the Maine explodes, and it's debated to this day whether it was a torpedo or a boiler or a mine. But the media, with William Randolph Hearst and other New York papers and other tabloids, blows this thing, boom, out of proportion. There's the Maine right there, killing hundreds of men. There's a graphic of it. We decide as a media body to blow this thing out of proportion, and it is one of the biggest incidents since before 9/11. This was the 9/11 of its time, if that makes any sense to anybody. So who do they blame? The media blames Spain. McKinley doesn't take the bait. McKinley is a very non-warlike president, Eric. Why? Like Eisenhower, he had seen war. He had seen guts. He had seen blown bodies. He had seen the damage at Antietam. He was an anti-war president. So they turn on McKinley, and they begin to not just hang him in effigy, they hang him in effigy and then take guns and shoot at the stuffings of him. Not, you know what I mean? Like normally you hang him in effigy, they throw things or something, but they're shooting him and he is super sensitive to public opinion, not in a nefarious politician way, but in a democracy kind of way. He reads every paper every day. He wants to know what the people are thinking. He goes out to talk to people. This is not because he wants to remain president or a political move. he really wants to know what the American people want. And right now, they want to go to war with Spain. And he is dragging his heels over this thing because he doesn't want to shoot from the hip, so to speak, and get involved in a war with Spain if he can avoid it. I mean, there are rebels that are in Cuba that may eventually topple the Spanish government in Cuba. There are rebellions in the Philippines and then we could swoop in or whatever. Okay. He holds out as long as he can, but then he has to go to war with Spain. And that is the Spanish-American War. And that leads to us, without getting into details of the Spanish-American War, it was pretty easy for us to defeat a European, a failed European empire with remnants in the Western Hemisphere. Let me put it that way. We're 2 miles away in Cuba, further away in the Philippines, but they have nothing in the Philippines. In fact, there is a warship that pulls up in Manila Harbor and fires a couple of artillery rounds into what seemingly is an unprotected Manila. And all of a sudden, a rowboat comes out with 2 guys in it. And it's the military head of the Spanish government in the Philippines with the medical official. And the guy says, "I'm sorry, we weren't able to return your salute. We don't have a battery of guns here to welcome you properly." So the guy says to him, he goes, "You know, we're at war." He goes, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, we've been at war for months." He goes, "Nobody told me." He says, "Well, do you have an army?" He goes, "No, we don't have anything." And he goes, "What do you have over there?" He goes, "Well, we got this fort, got some cannons, but nobody fires them." And well, he says, reluctantly, "Sir, I must tell you, you're now a prisoner of war." And they take him aboard the ship, and it's all a handshake agreement. And Manila kind of goes pretty quickly, but Manila is not the whole island. And Manila, there's a guy, an old man named MacArthur, the father of General MacArthur, Arthur MacArthur. I think his name was Arthur MacArthur, not to be confused with MacArthur Park, where you left a cake out in the rain. But the father of General Douglas MacArthur is one who's dealing with the Philippine insurrection or uprising or whatever. And the Filipinos are not going quietly into the night. And he writes these, a couple of admirals wrote that they were surprised how they fought to the death against us. As remnants or echoes or foreshadowing of Vietnam, Eric, because they were shocked that these people, impoverished as they were, this jungle society, was fighting to the death against the Americans and, would not roll over. So the Philippine battle was much heavier than the Cuban battle, which was really close to Florida and easier to get supplies. We could take territory in the Philippines. We couldn't hold it because we had no supply chain. And, you could take whatever you want, but the Philippines is that Arthur MacArthur?
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, so this guy, he's involved in that. And it's hard to hold the Philippines. Let me just put it that way. And we take Manila and then we leave. Like, we don't even have enough troops to hold the goddamn place. So what happens? We sue for peace, or the Spanish sue for peace. And there's a treaty being kicked around in Paris where we're negotiating a surrender of the Spanish. And the Spanish want reparations. They want different things. And we're negotiating in good faith. And all of a sudden, McKinley says, fuck them. Tell them to take it or leave it. And they got the ambassador who's negotiating in Paris, the American ambassador, says, "What?" He says, "Yeah, tell the Spanish ambassador to take it or leave it. We're taking everything." And he goes, "I can't tell him that." He goes, "Well, I'm going to write you a letter. You can read the letter, do whatever you want. But we're taking Cuba. We're taking Guam. We're taking the Philippines. We're taking everything in between. And we may annex Hawaii, too, which we're kicking around with Hawaii now." And this is the peak of American imperialism, as people have discussed in numerous books, numerous documentaries. This is the apex of American imperialism. It starts out like a beef with Spain. It's a phony beef. It's then, let's help these poor people. They then make statements in the papers about Cuba, how they can't govern themselves. The Philippines can't govern themselves. We're going to have to govern them until they become human. There's so many racist statements. I don't even have to bother you with the details. These are dark, swarthy people who can't read or write. They can't even govern themselves, let alone govern a nation. We have to go for Jesus, for Christ, for the Lord. There's all kinds of mumbo jumbo. So anyway, the American people are totally into this. And McKinley rides that crest of popularity. of a wartime president that is successful, Huntley. You know what I mean? That is not a bogged down situation where this is like I said, a dying empire in Spain that doesn't have the resources nor the will. They want about $20 million in reparations, because they were going to sell these places. Keep in mind, they were going to sell these places to Germany because Germany was interested in empire back then also. So Germany's on the phone saying how much you want for Guam, how much you want for the Philippines, how you want to throw in Cuba. All right, we'll talk about Cuba. So the American robber barons, the American industrials, the American capitalists said, hey, look, if Germany starts taking the sugar business out of Cuba and whatever the Philippines has, we're going to take a bath on this thing. And they've already fled Cuba. So now we're trying to get back into Cuba to get sugar. And you'd be surprised what's in Cuba. Bethlehem steel. There's a lot of manganese and all kinds of elements. It's not just sugar that's available in Cuba. There's a lot of stuff, Eric, which I wasn't aware of. But anyway, so they are about to sign this deal, and Spain wants $20 million. He says, give them $3 million and tell them to take a hike. This is McKinley, and they're playing hardball because the Spanish really don't have the heart to deal with this. You know what I mean? So, McKinley is going to win re-election again against William Jennings Bryan in 1900. He runs again. People are kind of tired of William Jennings Bryan, but McKinley's at his peak. So he really doesn't have a leg to stand on. Now, McKinley has a vice president named Garrett Hobart, a guy who was so obscure that even I didn't know who the hell this was. Garrett Hobart in 1899, right before the election, Eric, dies of heart failure. And there is no vice president. He's dead. There's nobody filling that space. He's got a bad ticker. He croaks. And apparently, William McKinley doesn't even ask anybody to be vice president. He has no say in it. This is really bizarre. He says, let the party decide who's vice president. So a guy out of the blue, this guy he doesn't look so good. Yeah, no, look at him. No wonder. He didn't look so good right there.
He's about to die.
He's about to die. It's probably because of that collar and tie. Anyway, so this guy who may or may not want to be vice president, the governor of New York, says, I wouldn't be vice president if you paid me. And he says, nobody asked you. Everybody says, who the hell's asking you to be vice president? It's Teddy Roosevelt. And he says, I don't care. I will not accept it. And it's some sort of reverse psychology by Teddy Roosevelt. And there he is, who obviously another war hero, the Battle of San Juan Hill, the Rough Riders in the Philippines and in Cuba. And he has a lot of support, obviously in New York, because he's governor in New York, and Republicans would like to take New York. And he has a lot of support out west. So he shows up in D.C., he's walking around for a couple of days, denying that he'll accept the nomination for vice president. And again, it becomes a political cartoon joke of who's asking you to take this nomination. Nobody even wants you to be vice president. He says, well, I'm a young man. I don't want to be saddled with a ceremonial job. And they're going, again, nobody's asking you, bro. But it kind of works. And he becomes vice president. Now, not unlike Cheney, Roosevelt believes that he'll be an assistant president. And in fact, that's what he's referred to as an assistant president. So it's kind of interesting. He goes the full Cheney on him. And Roosevelt has a huge personality. McKinley, not so much. Now, McKinley, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say Roosevelt, too. I think by many is considered the father of the progressive movement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's going to be explored a little bit more in a second, because he goes after the robber barons that McKinley embraced and busting the trust. So it's kind of weird that they don't want him in there. They don't want Roosevelt in there, the robber barons and the trust, the corporate guys. They really don't, because they know where he stands on these issues. And McKinley has a wife named Ida McKinley. Ida McKinley was a progressive. She was an abolitionist. She was pro-women's vote and came from a wealthy banking family where she worked as a teller in her father's bank. This is her a little later, maybe in her 40s, but she is a progressive within the Republican Party, and she has a tragic life. This is for the women who want to follow this, it's a fascinating story about Ida McKinley. Ida McKinley and William McKinley are madly in love. He cannot do anything without her. She gets involved in crocheting and crochets like 50,000 pairs of socks and gives them out to everyone. She teaches him how to build jewelry. Not that he does it, but she's into designing and making jewelry. She crochets and knits and everything else. So it turns out that she gives birth to a child. The first one, I think, is Ida or Katie. Maybe it's Katie is the first one. And the second child, Ida, dies quickly, like after 4 months. The second child dies. So she embraces the first child for dear life. I think that's Katie.
Katie, yeah.
Yeah, that's Katie. Okay. So the second child, who she embraces to protect her, she won't sleep without the child because she's so, grief-stricken about the loss of the second girl, and as is William McKinley. So her mother dies, Ida McKinley's mother. The second child's named Ida also. Ida McKinley, the wife's mother, dies. Then her grandfather dies. Then the baby dies. Then the second child dies, and she spirals into a depression and craziness, not unlike Lincoln's wife. And she develops what you call when you have seizures with your tongue, swallowing your tongue. Not Parkinson's. She developed epilepsy. She has depression. She gets hooked on laudanum, the opiate derivative drug. She gets hooked on whatever barbiturate-like things they had in 1896 or 1900, and she becomes a wreck of a woman. Now, when he dies, she just completely flips out. I think she dies within 5 years of McKinley. Completely loses her mind. So she lost her husband. She lost her father, her mother, the two daughters, and just a crazy amount of death surrounding Ida McKinley. I don't know how she survived after the death of her husband. That's just crazy. But anyway, so when he wins the second election and it becomes obvious that he's going to have a second term, at that convention, they handpick Teddy Roosevelt to be his running mate. And this will be important because when McKinley dies, Roosevelt becomes president. And you just go, well, where does that happen before? Where a guy with a different point of view politically takes over from the other guy. It's similar to LBJ and Kennedy. And he becomes a guy who goes on the warpath against the corporate interests, even though he's a Republican, conservative, blah, blah, blah. Now,
it was a lot different then because the Republicans had a lot more of a left-leaning tendency. At least some of them did.
I don't know about left, but he was from New York, so he came from money. He might have been a liberal Rockefeller Republican maybe years later. You might want to call him that. But just get back to the anarchists, because the anarchist movement is mostly immigrant driven, of these immigrants who are coming over and are subject to these incredibly brutal working conditions without unions, then with unions, then they go on strike, then they get fired, then they come up with phony names, they come back in. The anarchist movement is led by people like Emma Goldman out of New York, who comes from Russia to New York and then speaks about killing all government officials. I mean, they're in their speeches, Eric, there's Emma Goldman. That's not the Emma Goldman when she first came over. When she first came over, she was smoking hot. And the press was in love with her because she was so gorgeous and sexy and funny. And, she was like B. Arthur. I always thought about, like, she was like Maud. She was the anarchist Maud, if that makes any sense. But anyway, you've got the Haymarket riot, which happens in Chicago. That's a big deal. These four immigrants are, I don't know about immigrants, these four anarchists are hung for the Haymarket riot, which happens in Chicago. Chicago seems to be the incredible epicenter of the anarchist, socialist, communist movement in the United States. It's not New York. It's not California. There's a rendition of the Haymarket riot. Police opened fire. The anarchists opened fire. An anarchist threw a bomb, like something out of Spy versus Spy, like a round bomb with a fuse, just when this event was wrapping up in an alleyway. And what happens is the these guys get hung and convicted, although they never really proved that they did it. Let's put it that way. There was never, evidence. They just wanted blood of somebody, because a lot of cops were killed and people got blown to smithereens. So when this train, there's a guy named Bresci. I don't know. This is who is that?
Young Emma Goldman.
Oh yeah, there's a young Emma Goldman. That's a great photo. Yeah, she had a lot of affairs. She was not a lesbian. People thought she was. She was not. She had a bunch of lovers. One of them was named Jonah Most, who came over from Germany. He was one of the most famous anarchists in the world. She had a guy named Berkman, not Lance Berkman, who played for the Astros. This was, I think, Ira Berkman or something, different guy. So she was always giving speeches everywhere. And anyway, so to get back to this anarchist movement that wants to kill everyone, there's a guy named Bresci who's got a newspaper. He's an anarchist, Italian anarchist, lives in Newark, New Jersey, or Hoboken. He goes over to Spain. He says, I heard Emma Goldman says, Emma Goldman said, kill all leaders. All rulers must be exterminated is the actual quote. Just think about that. That was her catch line in every speech. All rulers must be exterminated. Okay, so Bresci says, yeah, I could buy into that. Takes a steamship, goes to Spain, to Italy, and he kills with a handgun the king of Italy, this guy Umberto I. And he goes, thank you very much. I'm an anarchist, and go F yourselves. This is going on. The royalty in Europe is freaking out. So Emma Goldman says, we don't care about that it's royal monarchy. We think democracy is really just fascism in disguise. Is that Bresci?
Yes.
Okay. So Bresci does that. Bresci becomes a model for Leon Czolgosz, who we will get into in a little while. He becomes his role model. But the situation is where people who are leaders in all these countries are freaking out because they hear that these anarchists want to kill them. And in fact, they are killing them. In fact, they're blowing them up. They're shooting them in the head. Two of them go into Clay Frick's office, who later become, Frick Museum. Frick was one of the big robber barons, steel guys. This guy Berkman goes into Frick's office, and the factory has been let go. Frick's in his office, and he shoots him twice in the neck. Not enough. He tries to stab him. And these are multimillionaires. Frick was the equivalent of Morgan. And he tries to. Frick was huge, right? So Frick they're in shock, but they knew that these anarchists were coming for them. He thought that Frick was wearing a bulletproof vest, which he wasn't. So he shot him in the head and neck twice. Then he sees that Frick is alive. He takes out his Bowie knife and starts stabbing him. This is, some anarchist. And then they tackle him. So what does he do? He takes out a capsule of nitroglycerin, puts it in his teeth to blow them all up with nitroglycerin, including himself. Just to give you an example of how freaking crazy these people were. They were psychos.
Hardcore.
Right. And everybody knew they were hardcore. I mean, they, like you were saying, that's where communism eventually led to politically. This is
Frick.
Oh, there's Frick. Okay, later in life, Frick. Yeah, the younger Frick survives this and will survive and become, one of the wealthiest men. He was also we'll do a story on this eventually. Part of the on Frick, yeah, because he was also part of the Johnstown flood. If you remember that story, we're going to get into that at some point in the Johnstown flood story, because Frick is a lot of ways the cause of the Johnstown flood. Now, the Haymarket riot happens in 1886, but it demonstrates just how mercurial the political climate is in the United States. It is like today, but with more assassinations, more explosions, Weather Underground level stuff combined with today. I mean, those are the three most violent political periods in American history. This era, the 60s with the Weather Underground, and probably today with BLM and Antifa teaming up. But anyway, make a long story short, this Emma Goldman becomes part of the story because she's speaking on the stump and she's influencing a lot of people. So there is a Pan American exposition in Buffalo, right? And this is like a World's Fair, Eric. And they have these various lits. Electricity is the big theme. Thomas Edison was involved, and it's this beautiful, beautiful exhibit. They have a they have a whole city of lights. They've got this music museum. They've got the moon. They have an exhibit of the moon, Eric, where they say we're going to walk on the moon. So when you went into the moon exhibit, they had midgets dressed as moon men passing out cheese. You can't make this up. I just thought I'd add that in. It has nothing to do with the story. But here it is. Yeah, that's the exposition, the Pan American Exposition. And this was huge in Buffalo, New York in September.
Similar to the World's Fair, right?
It was a World's Fair. Yeah. Essentially, they just didn't call it. They called it Expo. Well, in fact, the Expos, the baseball team came from Montreal, from the Montreal Exposition. Exposition was a term they used a lot instead of World's Fair. I think the Chicago Exposition, they had one back then, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
It was either World's Fair or Exposition with two interchangeable words. So anyway, so he has this exposition, and who's going to go? He's at the peak of his popularity, is the President of the United States, William McKinley. And McKinley goes to this thing, and the train pulls up in Buffalo, right? So they have a 4-cannon salute, right? So they put the cannons too close to the train, and all the windows in the train shatter to greet McKinley on that weekend. And everybody yells out, "Anarchists, anarchists," because everybody's on edge. And it was really that they put these cannons too close to the actual train, you know? And anyway, the first thought that they had was anarchist. So dig this. So McKinley goes to the thing, and the security for McKinley is immense. There's a threat the night before. They know that these anarchists, he's the prize target of the anarchists. So they have Pinkerton guards, they have army soldiers, they have Buffalo police, they have Secret Service, they have artillery guys. I mean, you couldn't get more protection for a president. However, there was no interaction between the different groups. One didn't know what the other one was doing.
Sort of like 9/11.
Well, I don't know about 9/11, but they were with McKinley, but there was no communication. So they were over here, this guy was over here, and who's over here, and you know, there's lone nuts running around, and this guy Leon Czolgosz may have been a lone nut assassin, right? A guy who just takes it on himself to become famous for this cause of anarchy. And here's a picture of, he liked his hair. He was big on his hair. He had like a huge family of Polish immigrants, although he personally, was 26 at the time when this was taken, is born in Detroit. The rest of the family comes over from Poland. They have various jobs in factories. They pooled their money. They buy a farm in Michigan, begin to become farmers and get out of the factory. He's worked in various factories, gets laid off, and obviously he gets some mental thing in his head that I'm going to figure out why this country's gone off the rails. So he creates a phony name that he uses as a pseudonym, not unlike Alec Heidel. He becomes Joe Niemann, and Niemann means nobody in German. And it's just a pseudonym that he uses to go around and talk to people and try to find out what's going on in certain areas of the country. Niemann, he changed the first name from Rob, different first names, but Niemann was the nobody name that he used as a cover. Why he needed a cover, we're going to find out. But he goes to Cleveland, he goes to Chicago, he goes to different places, and he begins to talk to people about ideas, including socialism, including anarchism, and including communism and everything else. But the reality of it is he's not the brightest guy in the world, and he may indeed be a lone nut. So what happens is he goes and he buys this Iverson handgun usually in a pawn shop or where he bought a thing. It was very expensive. And he seems to be stalking McKinley, Eric, where the night before he goes to the exposition, McKinley shows up. He meets him at the train. He gets jostled at the train. There's too many cops. He says this later in interviews. There were too many cops at the train station. I was getting pushed around. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to blow my chance by getting arrested, carrying this 32 automatic. And I realized that I'm going to just follow him, which he does. And McKinley comes back a couple of times to the exposition. He comes back a second time. And they have a situation where McKinley is going to shake hands with everyone. McKinley, being a vet, this is a bizarre thing. Maybe Trump has this too, but McKinley was able to shake 50 hands in 1 minute. Think about that. And he would grab your wrist, so he didn't get his fingers crunched by you. With his other hand, he'd grab your wrist, pull it into the middle of his hand, and shake it so his hand didn't get squeezed, and they'll let go of you, and the next guy would come in. He was able to do 50 a minute, just like that. And it was called the McKinley handshake. So they have a door to let in all the people. Now, this thing is so popular. There's 100,000 people there, Eric. He's not going to shake 100,000 hands, but
no.
He's got the height of his popularity, and he's got a lot of people who want to shake his hand. So what this guy does, this Czolgosz, is he gets a handkerchief and he puts it over his hand and the gun, which is really weird. Yeah, here's a artist's conception of what he did. And he does not pocket the gun. He does not put the gun in his coat pocket. He does not put it in his waistband. He puts it right here. See where my hand is? Like it's injured. Like there's no sling. And he just keeps it there for 3 days. Where what you're seeing is that white handkerchief on the end of an arm. Now, people thinking maybe it's a wound, maybe he had a whatever. Nobody challenges the fact that this guy has a gun underneath the handkerchief. And that's where he keeps it into the exposition at the train station, and it's second time at the exposition. And maybe there's a photo of the actual gun. I think maybe if you have one of those, you could see the gun, the real gun. Okay, yeah. There's the weapon. It's this Ivor Johnson automatic pistol and a handkerchief. Yeah, it's a 32 caliber, but it's a beautiful, beautiful handgun. So he gets up to the shake the hand, and what he does is McKinley sees that he's got a wounded right hand. So McKinley sticks out his hand, maybe to just shake the left hand, right? He go like this. McKinley sees that, and Czolgosz bats it away, sticks the gun right in McKinley's stomach, and fires 2 shots. He'll get a third off, I think, in a couple of seconds, but that doesn't hit him. The first shot hits a button on McKinley's coat, and it'll be found in McKinley's coat on the way to the hospital. The second shot goes through his stomach, his pancreas, his uterus, every single organ gets pierced by the second bullet. And just like Garfield, it's never found. Okay, so McKinley's laying on the ground, and they're beating the living crap out of Czolgosz. And I mean pounding the piss out of him. There's a guy who's his personal bodyguard, Garfield's personal bodyguard, named George Foster. And George Foster, again, not to be confused with the Cincinnati Reds left fielder, George Foster, who hit 50-plus home runs for the Reds one year. This is a different George Foster. This is the white George Foster. And he pounds the piss out of Czolgosz. And McKinley, although mortally wounded, says, "Please go easy on him, boys. Please go easy on him." And McKinley is conscious. He's not in great pain. He's really fat. The bullet is just lodged in his stomach somewhere, Eric. You know what I mean? And the other one doesn't penetrate him. So they take him to a hospital, and they said, "Who's the best surgeon in Buffalo?" He's doing a neck injury. Can't be bothered. They go, "Well, tell him it's the president." "No, I swear to God." They go, "It's the president. It's been shot." He goes, "I can't do it." So they get like some lesser guys who work on him. And like the Garfield thing, Edison sends his x-ray machine again up to Buffalo by train. Big thing. And they said, "Let's see if we can find the bullet." Well, they don't want to try it on McKinley. So they find a fat guy who looks like McKinley, and they try to x-ray him to see if they can find anything inside of him. And of course, there is no bullet in the other fat guy. So they just go, it doesn't work. We're never going to find the bullet in McKinley. McKinley lives, like Garfield, in this case, 8 days and dies of gangrene. Again, not because of the bullet, but the bullet leads to gangrene, Eric, as we discussed in the Garfield episode. McKinley has the same scenario. Modern medicine would have quickly helped McKinley to survive. And in this case, he gets gangrene. And after 8 days, he goes sitting up at times. He's talking to people. His wife comes in. He's totally fine. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt shows up and he says, you seem okay. I'm going to go hiking in the Adirondacks. And he goes, yeah, sure, go ahead. So he goes to Adirondacks, go hiking. And they think what I'm saying is everyone thinks McKinley's going to live. You know what I mean? Like there's no threat to his life. The papers are kind of leaning towards, promoting the fact that he's going to live. They're not negative. They love McKinley. And in fact, these doctors, once again, incompetence or the science of the time, in 1901, this was as good as it was going to get. So when he does die in 8 days, they said, where is Roosevelt? And Roosevelt is in the middle of the Adirondack Mountains, hiking and camping. And they've got to go on a search to find Teddy Roosevelt to tell him, you're the president of the United States. And they eventually find Roosevelt. They put him on a special train. They bring him to Buffalo. And there's a funeral for McKinley. And McKinley is then taken to D.C., to Lyon State, and then to Ohio, to his home, where tens of thousands of people show up for the funeral. And he is immediately arrested, Chalgosh. But you would think after Garfield that they had made it into a federal crime to kill the president. This is the footage of the funeral, right?
Yeah. Okay. There's no sound, so maybe we can
get away with it.
No, we could talk.
They'll come from the grave. They'll come from the grave to give us a strike. Anyway, so Chalgosh, there is still no federal law, and the prosecutor in the case says, I think there's a federal law because they changed it when Garfield got killed. Turns out they didn't. It's still not a federal crime to kill a president, and he is prosecuted by state prosecutors in the state of New York, which would have happened in the JFK case in Dallas. He is tried, arrested, and put in jail, and eventually bad things happen to Chalgosh and by state prosecutors. Now, Chalgosh doesn't want a lawyer. They give him 2 judges to be his lawyer. The case is literally takes like a week. You know what I mean? His lawyers, there's a great photo, Chalgosh, in the cell at Auburn prison, way upstate New York. That looks like the Sing Sing thing. They had a lot of prisons that look like that lattice work door. But they also had Old Sparky was at Auburn. Old Sparky was at Sing Sing, the electric chair, both places, conveniently for Chalgosh. So Chalgosh, the jury decides, he pleads guilty, by the way. And the judge says, nah, you can't do it. He goes, no, I could plead guilty. He goes, nah, we want to have a show trial. So they go, all right, why did you kill him? He goes, I intended to kill him. He is a corrupt despot. People live in total poverty in this country, and I did it to save the working man. He admits it flat out. And the jury says, okay. 32 minutes later, they come back with a death penalty, the jury. That's how long it took. Here is if this footage works, I don't know, we could see the...
we can't play all of it, but this is him being led in.
No, it's a reenactment. This is not him. Just keep that in mind. It's a reenactment. This is from Edison.
Right.
Showing you
a series of.
I think you'll see what Chalgosh was speaking up until the end. He went, according to the witnesses, never buckled, never recanted, never felt threatened. He went out. Oh, that's the lighting. Yeah, Edison was using that to show that you can light up light bulbs. That was the whole point of this thing. When Edison was battling Tesla for New York Current gigs, he used this footage to show you how great AC current is versus DC current, or vice versa. this was an actor being put into the chair, but quite similar.
Regardless.
Regardless, yeah, very similar situation. So Cholgash, they come to Cholgash and they say, "Did you?" This is what I'm going to get to with this story because we got to move it along here. Cholgash is electrocuted and put into a coffin. Of course, they pour a ton of sulfuric acid over his face and body to completely disfigure him and melt him. Just want the people at home to realize. But my favorite thing in the Filipino War was the rebels, just because with the barbarism they did to Cholgash is really interesting. They didn't want him to be martyred, so they poured sulfuric acid over him and then burned his clothes in the prison. I don't know if this is part of the process, but that's what they did. They wouldn't let his brother take the body. They wouldn't let the family take it. The brother and brother-in-law did visit him. He shunned the priests who were trying to get in to see him. The priests were brought in anyway. He hated the Catholic Church. He was raised Catholic, blah, blah, blah. But getting back to the insurrection in the Philippines for 1 second, they had hated the American soldiers so much that when they captured an American soldier, they would, or a sailor in this case, they would torture them and kill them. And one of the methods they used was to bury you with just your head sticking out of the sand, Hunley, and your mouth is propped open with a stick, right? And they came upon these guys. They were trying to scare the hell out of us, and it was very effective.
No, it would work.
I know, but this is where it gets really bizarre. There would be a trail of sugar coming from your mouth through the sand, and ants would eat the sugar, go into your mouth, and eat you out from the inside out. And wow. I thought, wow, man, but we countered with our own water torture, where we would pour gallons of water into a guy's mouth until he became bloated like a pregnant woman when we were trying to get information out of them. And then we'd step on his stomach, blowing the water out of his mouth until he died or gave us the information as to where the rebel leader was. So just to digress about how brutal the Filipino part of this thing was. We would later obviously take over Cuba, take over the Philippines, and even to this day, they're part of our empire. But anyway, getting back to Cholgash, they asked him, "Did you do this alone?" He goes, "Oh yeah, came up with it, did it. Nobody's involved, just me. I did it. I'm Leon Cholgash, greatest day of my life." And they said, "Well, we got to look into it because we had a conspiracy with this Lincoln thing." I don't know if you recall that one. It wasn't that long ago. It was like 40 years ago. But then we had the Garfield. It could happen, and they had the conspiracy with Lincoln. Garfield. Maybe a conspiracy with Guiteau. We're not really sure. Guiteau says he did it for the vice president. Okay. In this case, let me just get into, because nobody has addressed the conspiracy to kill McKinley. So this is all new ground, which is why I wanted to do the episode. So they interview a guy, just to go back, there was an organization called CELA in Cleveland. It was a secret organization. And Cholgash began, in retrospect, this is what my research has led to. Cholgash joined these secret societies 2 or 3 years before. These were essentially socialist groups and then later anarchist groups. Sila means force. He met a guy named Anton Zwolinski, who was an upholsterer, who brought him into the anarchist community in Cleveland. He also had tons of money on him at the end, by the way. I forgot to tell you, Eric. Oddly enough, yeah, he was loaded with money in a very impoverished time. So Cholgash is obviously dejected about getting fired from all these jobs. He becomes a full-fledged radical. He becomes an anarchist, and he goes to a speech by Emma Goldman in Chicago. And he goes up and he talks to Emma Goldman, the most famous anarchist in America. That's right. Emma Goldman and Leon have a long conversation. And Leon says, "What books do you recommend for me to read?" So she says, "Read this, read that, read this." So she comes and she says, "Oh, it's kind of interesting." She's with this guy, Alex Berkman, who's another one, the guy who tried to kill Frick. And is this Berkman?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's the guy who tries to kill Frick, which is really a mismatch because Frick was a big, strong guy. And even while being an assassin's victim, was still able to fight this guy off. So anyway, among the radicals that he meets, he goes back to Cleveland, and he goes to the house of Abraham Isaac. And you say, well, who's Abraham Isaac? Abraham Isaac is a publisher of a magazine like the Village Voice. He is the publisher of a newspaper called Free Society. It's like The Nation. It's like The Atlantic. It's the #1 radical publication in America. And Abraham Isaac has all these different writers. One of the writers is Emma Goldman. All these other people are writing for the periodical. And who's at the house in Chicago? This is like July of that year. So you're talking about July 12th, 1901, the summer of the assassination, Eric. Who shows up at the door? Czolgosz. What does Czolgosz want? He wants to meet with Emma Goldman and the publisher of Free Society. Come on in. You're Czolgosz. Why not? So Leon Czolgosz, 26 years of age, comes in. He meets with the #1 anarchist in the country, Emma Goldman, who's talking and calling for the assassination of all leaders of all governments, brazenly. She's been in jail a couple of times for inciting riots. She is the biggest feminist in the country. She is the biggest radical in the country. She is Ma Radical and Ma Anarchy.
Radical.
She's Ma. They call her Ma Anarchy, I think. But anyway, so Emma Goldman is there. Czolgosz is there. And she says, I got to go because I got to catch a train back to New York. So she says, come with me to the train station. We'll keep talking. This is a guy that people historically have said was a lone nut. I just want to bring this out to the show today. This is a guy they said was insane. It's a guy they said didn't have any friends. It's a guy they said killed McKinley. It's in every history book as some lone nut. He has always been a lone nut. But again, here he is talking with Emma Goldman and the publisher of Free Society magazine. Okay, she now goes to the train station with Emma Goldman. How does she get to the train station? Chicago subway system, or the elevated. And they're hanging on the straps together. Leon, in 3 months, he'll be the assassin of the president. And here's Emma Goldman with the assassin of the president on way to the Chicago train station so she can go back to New York. Gets to the Chicago train station, and like is usually the custom, there's a lot of people waiting for her because she is a rock star, Eric. She is a rock star. And there's photos of her in Union Square, New York, with 25,000 people. She's making huge bank on these speaking engagements. She is huge. So she is now with him. She digs him. She says he's super sensitive in her memoirs. She defends Czolgosz after the assassination. But dig this. She gets there and she turns him over to the rest of the anarchists. And she says, I got to get on the train to New York. This guy wants to be one of us. He's in a couple of secret societies. Why don't you take him under your wing and teach him how to be a professional anarchist? And she leaves. She goes off on the train. So they feel very suspicious towards Czolgosz, this group. And they feel, and this is interesting, that he is Ray Epps. They feel that his questions are so on the nose and so direct, and he's an idiot. He doesn't know anything about anarchism. And he almost seems like a Lee Harvey Oswald posing as an anarchist to them. Now, how do I know that? I know that because the following week in that magazine that I told you, they wrote the following statement. Attention, attention. The attention of the comrades is called to another spy. He is well-dressed, a medium height, rather narrow shoulders, blonde, about 25 years of age. Up to the present, he has made his appearance in Chicago and Cleveland. In the former place, he remained but a short time, while in Cleveland, he disappeared when the comrades had confirmed themselves of his identity and were on the point of exposing him. His demeanor is of the usual sort, pretending to be greatly interested in the cause, asking for names or soliciting aid for acts of contemplated violence. In this same individual makes his appearance elsewhere. If he makes an appearance, comrades are warned in advance and can act accordingly. Now, they put this out nationally about Czolgosz because they didn't believe he was the real deal. They thought he was an infiltrator, Hunley.
That's funny.
But it's also interesting because they were onto this guy. This was their Ray Epps. They smelled a rat. Now, my question to you is, did Czolgosz act alone? Did he have money given to him? He apparently was spending it hand over fist. He had quite a bit the year up to that whole year. of money, renting hotel rooms, doing all this stuff, not unlike a James Earl Ray type. But Czolgosz is outed by them, and he goes to Buffalo from Chicago and via Cleveland. He goes to Buffalo to do what he did. And they say, "Did you have any Confederates, sir?" And like I said, he says no. Well, a guy shows up who sees his picture in the paper. And that guy is named Walter Nowak. And Walter Nowak, who is a Polish anarchist who doesn't like killing heads of countries. He believes that it's bad press when you kill the president for your political cause, as crazy as that sounds. He comes from Cleveland, and he IDs Leon Czolgosz. How do we know that? Because they put him in a cell with him, and he gets up and he says, "Walter." He says, "Leon." And Walter Nowak says to the police, this guy had Confederates. This guy was part of a group of 21 anarchists in a secret society that I was part of as Walter Nowak. That's how I know, because I bailed out on this secret society. And he begins to tell the authorities this. Fred Neiman was his given pseudonym, by the way. He tells the authorities this. So what do the authorities do? They begin the Palmer raids. They round up Emma Goldman. They round up all these guys. That's where the arrests begin. They finally get Goldman, and she's arrested for the assassination of the president. They grill her day after day after day under the intense light of the third degree, and eventually cannot get her to confess. And she is released, Eric. He continues to say he did it alone. But the fact of the matter is, this guy Nowak and a couple of others, including the guy's brother, including Czolgosz's brother, comes and confronts him and says, "Who put you up to this? Because you are not smart enough to have done all this." And they're ostensibly correct. They're ostensibly correct. Could he have been lucky? Yeah, he could have been lucky. Could he have done it? Yeah. But history does not tell us about the conspiracy to kill Lincoln that much. And there is nothing about the conspiracy to kill McKinley in documents that I've found, other than the information I've just provided for the audience. So I don't know if it's true, but there's certainly evidence that there was a conspiracy to kill McKinley. Now, keep in mind, when Roosevelt comes in, the entire political climate changes, and he goes after the robber barons. Not something the anarchists would have been opposed to. I know. It's kind of interesting. You have to look at who the successor is and what policy changes occur to see if there is a conspiracy or a change in policy. Now, if there was no change in policy, I would just say, all right, whatever. But like in the JFK case, we get, National Security Action Memo 273 signed by LBJ, thereby creating the Vietnam War and reversing the National Security Action Memo 263 by JFK. So you see a quid pro quo. Is the quid pro quo here the robber barons being put in their place by Teddy Roosevelt? It's kind of interesting to think about it. And was this guy a Ray Epps? Was he part of a conspiracy? Or was he a government agent? Was he a guy who was used as a pawn? Was he a guy who was a lone nut that they directed to do this? I don't know.
Now, when was O&I founded?
1886, I think. O&I was involved in the Filipino thing too.
Right. And who was the Secretary of the Navy?
That I don't know.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Okay, so the reality.
Not that I'm saying anything, but it's just there's an interesting.
No, I know. I'm just saying there's a lot of smoke here, Eric. There's a lot of smoke. Now, she goes back to live in an apartment. She kind of, for 10 years, gets out of the anarchy business, becomes a private nurse, goes and lives in an apartment at 210 East 13th Street, where she becomes a nurse and privately does things in New York, completely away from the media. And there's a guy who lived in that building, 210 East 13th Street, and you're looking at him. I lived in that same building with Tony Kish, the great sax player from New York, in an apartment owned by Floyd Domino, the keyboard player and Grammy Award winner from the band Asleep at the Wheel. So I actually ended up living in the same building as Emma Goldman, who was long since dead at the time, but it was a famous building in New York. So anyway, she kind of disappears from the scene, which is what people wanted because she was creating so much chaos and creating so much anarchy. This is her deportation photo when they ship her back. Finally, she's deported from the United States. She's not happy about it and goes back to, she was Lithuanian, I think, but they send her back to the Soviet Union, which she didn't even like the Bolsheviks. She hated everybody, this woman. She didn't like the communists. She didn't want any government whatsoever. She hated her father, who was an Orthodox Jew. She didn't like him, So this is a woman who apparently was very funny in private, very funny on the stump. She was a great speaker. But look, I mean, she gets deported. The Palmer raids happen. And then a subject of a later show will be put into power by Palmer, the Attorney General, and that's J. Edgar Hoover. And this leads to the creation of the FBI, which is where I was going with this cockamamie story. This whole story that I just told you will eventually lead to all kinds of repression against the Reds, the Red Scare, the Red Menace, the early ones in the 20s, the 1920s. The second one in the 50s is another Red Scare, but this one in the 20s leads to the creation of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI.
Wow. So far-reaching effects.
Well, that's why I wanted to do the story, because the tentacles of the Czolgosz case have never really been explored. I mean, this guy has long tentacles. The act of what he did, the killing of McKinley, which has been depicted in history as this random act of a nut that had no ramifications. Apparently, if you drill down beneath the surface, you're going to find it has some ramifications. You know,
well, even if you look at his successor, there's huge ramifications.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Roosevelt's policies, father of the Progressive Party. Politics, the antitrust movement. I mean, all of these things flipped a lot of things on their head.
Right. I mean, it is interesting that the assassination of this guy, McKinley, leads to the rise of the Roosevelts, which will lead to the rise of his cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which will come full circle in a couple of years when he becomes president. Multiple term presidents with huge influences on the United States, both of them, both of these presidents.
Profound.
Yeah.
Wow.
I hope you like that, because I think there's a lot there. Definitely. It's funny because when they hung the four guys from the Haymarket riot, all four of them, the last words were yelling at the top of their lungs, each individual guy, "Hurrah for anarchy." Remember that. Hurrah for anarchy. And then one of the other benefits from the military point of view from the San Juan Hill battle that Teddy Roosevelt's involved in is it's the first real major engagement of the Gatling gun, Eric, where they just mowing people down with a Gatling gun. They had to be careful not to stick their fingers in front of it, because you get your fingers blown off in a millisecond.
And the barrels would melt if you played them too long. Yeah. Yep. That was some harsh stuff.
Right.
The thing is, though, you're right. The Spanish Empire at that point was kind of like Reagan going into Grenada.
Mm-hmm. That was a miniature version of this. Mm-hmm. At first, it was about U.S. interest. Then it was, fuck it, just let's take it. It's just like they even dropped the pretense after a while. The people in the editorial department of magazines and newspapers said, who cares? Just take it. You know what I mean? Wow. It really became imperialistic and racist and, brazen. Let's just put it that way. Because they had 1 billion widgets to sell, because these factories, as I said at the beginning of the show, had mass-produced things for no freaking reason other than they had unlimited resources, unlimited coal, unlimited cheap labor, and the machinery to produce them. It's like making, 10,000 million coffee tables and nobody's looking for a coffee table. Now, okay, what are you going to do with coffee tables? We're going to sell them in China. Well, you can't sell them in China yet because we have no relationship with China. You know what I mean? There was nowhere to dump this crap. And that's why they had to go out and get these markets, including China.
Which isn't that different than now.
That's now
we have bullshit jobs. No, right. I'm saying, and not just China. Everybody will draw the parallel to China, but I'm talking about even here. What are middle management and half of accounting departments and all this overhead, all this bureaucracy, even within corporations. It's like as they grow, they become overweight and they die out. over and over and over.
Well, don't forget the Stephen Sondheim musical Assassins with the ballad of the ballad of Leon Czolgosz. He is the main star of the Sondheim Broadway musical Assassins. Some guy contacted me, I don't know, like half a year ago, saying he starred as Leon Czolgosz in Assassins. Now, I don't know if it was a road company or the original Broadway production, but he said, I'd like to sing the ballad of Leon Czolgosz to you. And I said, well, maybe at a later time when we do the episode. I'm sure I'm going to hear from this guy again because he was hawking me a chinik to do the Czolgosz story. You know what I mean? Which we've now crossed off the list. Somebody said yesterday, are you going to do Garfield? And I go, bro, I think we did Garfield.
Yeah, we did Garfield, but it's weird the parallels too, because like Garfield, though I don't think Garfield was X-ray. I thought that was Marconi's metal detector.
Yeah, but it was Edison who brought it in.
Okay,
it was Edison who brings in the X-ray. Edison brings in the metal detector. Neither one of them are allowed to be used because of the egos of the doctors. Really, you know what I mean?
Of course. I mean, well, the times were different,
right? Times were different, but I don't know if you got some photos there I sent you. Let me just see some of these photos I gave you. There's a photo of prior to the assassination, moments before it happens, Eric. There's a black and white photo. I don't know if you still have that one.
I do. Is that I think he's...
Yeah, there it is. There it is. He's
over there on the right, or?
No. He's not in the photo, but this is moments before the actual assassination. This is literally moments. He's not in the frame.
Okay.
I think that's George Forster on the left. You can see he's surrounded, and that's some dignitary there with a white jacket, white shirt right there. And also, if you could show, I think there's show the hallway of the hall itself inside with an X on the ground where he was killed. There's
the music,
the music hall. Yeah. There's the X right there. You could see how the situation. That flag was put there to stop anyone from coming in through that door, which was back there. There's a couple of artist renderings of the assassination. And then there is the photo of Czolgosz in prison.
Which I showed.
Right, but there's also his prison card, like his actual, I don't know if you saw that one, the prison card, which is kind of interesting. You see one of Admiral Dewey?
Yep.
Okay, Admiral Dewey becomes the most famous man in America. This cat. Yeah, that's Admiral Dewey. He becomes, everybody's naming their kids after him. There's Dewey this, Dewey that. He is the military naval winner in these battles for us in the Philippines and also specifically in Cuba. It's funny because nobody even knows about the Philippine battle. They start out with this whole Cuban thing, and we end up seizing the opportunity to take the Philippines. Like, that wasn't our goal. Our goal was simply to take Cuba or liberate Cuba. And somebody looked and said, hey, nobody's guarding the Philippines. Really? Let's go. But this whole debate about Hawaii also comes into play, and all these Pacific islands that we then seize all come into play. And they're all really the beginning of American imperialism, which the people are behind it, but it's a dark period in American history for sure. I mean, we can discuss it with Jose Vega on Wednesday.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure Vega's hip to it. Vega's a Puerto Rican, so he must know this 10 times better than us.
Yeah, for sure. And he probably has read up on anarchists a little bit.
Oh, he definitely has. He wanted to be an anarchist at the age of 5.
Well, isn't that a requirement?
Mm-hmm. But it's not unlike the climate of Antifa and BLM and the crazy crap that's going on today. It was violent. They believe that's his prison card. He worshipped his hair. I just want to point that out. He was a hair worshiping Elvis hair freak who put different products in and loved that pompadour and had a very low brow. But apparently,
what if he had an affair with Emma?
Okay, she wanted him. It didn't happen, but she wanted him. She said he's a super. Well, no, you know what? I take that back. I don't know, because she did say. She wrote an entire essay, just to finish this up with Emma Goldman. She wrote an entire essay in defense of him. This is after the fact. People flipped out over this essay, which was in that same publication I mentioned before, Free Society. And she said that he was a super sensitive guy. We turned our back on him. He was a kid. We should have embraced him. He did what we should have done. No backing down. She was the anarchist movement turned on her. Progressives turned on her. She defended the killing of McKinley. She said he was a king. He deserved to die for all the different reasons we just mentioned in the show. Philippines, Cuba, blah, blah, blah. And Czolgosz did what we wanted to do and should have done. And she backs him in the essay, which I'll put up on Locals. I found a copy of it. I'll put it up on Locals after the show. It's a fascinating article, and some other articles that I have from, I had to go into microfiche to get some of these things from back in the day. San Francisco Chronicle and some stuff. I just get sidetracked into these other stories sometimes when I'm reading the paper, you know, like there was some white-black shootout in Louisiana. I mean, there's all these incredibly violent stories back then. This is, you know, 1901, Eric, 1900, 1901. And it's almost the beginning of modern America. That the Teddy Roosevelt is the modern presidency for the first time. And McKinley is the end of the royal presidents at that assassination level. But yeah, so she defends him, Emma Goldman, and it really splinters the anarchist movement, her defense of Czolgosz.
I can sort of see why, because
well, after that article comes out, be on the lookout for Czolgosz as a government agent. She demands and gets a retraction, saying before this even happened, she gets a retraction on Czolgosz. It just really strange relationship. The money, the connection to Emma Goldman, the connection to the anarchist movement, their violence. You know, if he never ran into her twice, I'd say maybe there was no connection. But there's a lot of smoke there, Hunley. A lot of smoke.
Very, very interesting. For
yeah,
sure.
It is interesting, bro. I mean, I just discovered this myself. So it's not like I was sitting on this. I just discovered this past few weeks. But this is really fascinating stuff.
Well, on the financial note that I'm always interested in, and I know you are too, Dustin Russell. He wasn't sure he was going to make it today, so he hopped a flight and changed time zones. He made it.
Welcome aboard.
Oh, and Pasha is here. Robert Todd Lincoln, the original object of Come On, Bobby?
Maybe. I don't know, but he may have been involved in all the assassinations. He might have been a serial killer.
And we got a new member with Enormous Peter. Very funny.
That's interesting.
Linda Solinsky. I'm ready for my bedtime stories, Uncle Mark.
That's Saul Alinsky's daughter, Linda Zelinsky.
Laura Williams is a new member. And we have Michael Hebner back.
Oh, wow. Somebody put up a thing on my Twitter feed about him in a Phillies uniform, which I think he may, at the end of his career, have been a Philly. I always knew him as a Buckaroo, but he might have been a Philly at the end.
Cool. And Not Noir. Hey, I gave Mark a shout out in my latest issue of McKinley Alpha. I'll send it to you, Eric. Thank you for the plug, and your viewers should check it out.
McKinley Alpha?
I'm not sure, but I just plugged it. So McKinley Alpha, folks, and Mark has shouted out.
I'm not shouting anything out. I'm not going down.
You were shouted out.
Oh, I see.
All right. Enormous Peter is back again. True Patriots. I appreciate you gents sharing these national gems. I'm telling anyone who will listen about this channel.
Don't tell anybody. They're going to come after us, Enormous. I mean, it's better that nobody knows. We keep it small and secret. When you get big, they come after you in this country, as we've seen recently.
That's true. So remember to subscribe.
Remember to subscribe. I mean, that's the least you can do, but keep it small. Oh, wait a second. We don't have a sponsor today, but we do have a sponsor, which is Heroes of the Blues. And today's hero of the blues may have been a socialist, for all I know. Sam Collins. A lot of these guys played the blues in Chicago, where they went electric and came up from the Mississippi Delta. Born in 1887 in Louisiana, Collins was raised in southern Mississippi. His 19 recordings from 1927, 1932 reflect a background in street singing and tent shows, similar, Eric, to Blind Willie McTell. His free-form bottleneck approach and high-pitched singing gave him a distinctive musical sound. Collins settled in Chicago and died there in 1954. Again, Sam Collins, today's hero of the blues. Thank you.
All right. We have Dina. Excellent show. Thanks. Enjoying from Korea.
Wow. From
Hi,
Korea.
tomorrow. It's tomorrow there.
Did you see that woman who wrote us that letter about polio? That she saw the Salk episode and she had polio as a kid. You sent it to me yesterday. This long email.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
The woman who had polio and
yeah, quite the background.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, we do get emails that come in. There's a contact form at erichunley.com.
Holy cow, that was fascinating.
Let me see. Sorry.
She took the Salk vaccine and later became a track star or something.
Yeah, she overcame it and then did the 50-yard dash. And
right. Yeah. That's going to my Hall of Fame.
Hi, Jen Molly. BTK at $5. Whatever. Anarchists, leftists, communists, or fascists means nothing to me. I support a representative republic without corruption. The rest will go. Good luck.
Good luck saying that. I mean, we're trying to not to defend any one of those things, but there are nuances and different things. I mean, everybody can be thrown in the same basket together, but sometimes it's better to divide and conquer them. If you can get the socialists fighting with the anarchists, you may be able to go to Target and have a good shopping day. So it may be motivation to have them turn on each other.
Yeah, or ultimately they usually turn on themselves because nobody's
right. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, the anarchists fought over everything. Whether you should vote, whether you should protest, whether you should kill people. I mean, they had so many infighting among the anarchists. There may have been 10,000 anarchists in the entire country, Hunley.
It's a lot like libertarians.
No, but I'm saying
about it, but they fight.
But it's more like Antifa, like what Andy No has found out. There's very few Antifa in the country, but they've caused. There may be. Jordan Peterson talks about this in the interview with RFK Jr., which I highly recommend. He went and met with these people who were experts on Antifa. One of them, Andy No, and it turned out they were tiny little cells scattered around the country, and there may have been 600 total of these guys, but they all show up at each event. And that's kind of what happened with the anarchists.
Right. But they're all purists is what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like if you go hang out with and read up on the libertarians, they're fighting into the weeds over every nuance of whatever it is. They're not violent like, Antifa or anything, but they're just super sticker from John S. 20 pounds. Thank you, sir. Gino, $4.99. Sorry, I'm late. Nice suit, Mark. Looking good, Eric. How many shots did I miss? When Mark says you can't make this up. I don't think you said that this time.
I don't think I said it today because it's not. I mean, this is my America's Untold Story drinking glass, by the way, this is like a lime club soda for those who keep asking me what the hell I'm drinking.
Yeah, I've heard from Ziggy actually that she's sold out of glasses and is hoping a new shipment comes in so she can keep making them.
Wow. She's got like a factory, a non-union factory in Newark where she's employed
herself.
These anarchists.
she's our labor force.
Kind of interesting that the working conditions were so brutal that it led to these political revolutions. They did not come out of thin air. I mean, these guys ran brutal factories, and their scheme was to cut wages on purpose, make them protest, fire all of them, and hire new people. That was their actual organized plan, union or non-union. So a lot of them, including Cholgash, came back under assumed names to get their jobs back. That's why he was using an assumed name. He got his job back at a factory.
And that's tied into I forgot the name of the book, but with the meat markets of Chicago is tied.
Upton
Sinclair. Yeah. All kinds of comes out of that, right? New member from Take Mosey, I guess. Thank you. And Live Well Chiropractic with a $50 super sticker.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
I had a week back. I got it about a week back, but it's a chiropractic joke. Yeah, it's an old chiropractic joke.
$1.99 super sticker. Thank you. John Comos. Great info, guys. Thanks. Thank you, John.
It's a weird story, Eric. It really is a weird story.
It is. It definitely is. It's very overlooked.
Because there's only been 4 presidents assassinated, and this is the one that's least known, in my humble opinion.
Well, I think 2 of them.
Yeah,
because I think Garfield is just as oddly obscure. It's like Lincoln and Kennedy, and everybody talks about them. They're not quite 100 years apart, And then the two in between are like, oh yeah, I guess a couple others did too.
Well, this one is because it's 1900. It's Teddy Roosevelt. There's a lot of ramifications to this assassination, as opposed to Garfield, which had its own ramifications, but not like this. And both him and Garfield were in the Civil War.
Yeah, crazy. Montine McCord, $10. Thank you very, very much. East Texas Gal. Excellent,
I like her
as usual.
Yeah,
I like her too.
Been around since there's some of these.
Oh yeah, she's
been around from the beginning.
Oh, for sure. Scott Benbow, spreading the word about show here in Buckeye, Arizona.
Wait a minute, where is Buckeye? I've been to Buckeye. I'm going to go to.
I think it's northern Arizona.
Right, it's near Sedona. I'm going to go back to Prescott in July for a week or so. I'll be broadcasting from Prescott, Arizona, but Buckeye is on the way.
I think Buckeye is where my dad was a general contractor, rebuilt the basketball gym floor.
Wow.
Up there.
Well, I'll be revisiting the basketball gym floor of the Hunley edifice.
Yeah, there you go. Galveston County Mike. Thank you, gentlemen. Best regards from where the Falstaff Brewery used to be.
Interesting.
It's one of the things I hate in life is when you get to the point where everything is a used to be.
Yeah. But America is a whole mess of used to be. They tore down these massive exhibits in the Pan American Exposition within a couple of months. They completely demolished these incredible structures, which is the tradition in World's Fairs and expositions. The only thing left, when I was a kid, we went to New York World's Fair in Queens, and the Ford Motor Company had a futuristic, you sat in a car, went through a whole world. I mean, it was mind-blowing. The only thing left is the Unisphere that's still out there in Forest Meadows, in Queens, Flushing Meadows, I take it back. But everything else was dismantled, Eric. It's very interesting that they take these things apart like it's some sort of traveling carnival.
Well, it kind of is.
But it's not put up anywhere else. It's not like resurrected.
The Olympics were a little bit that way too. I think they would take a lot of that down. I think they've gotten better about it. In
what
some
a
place
waste.
like Lake Placid, they kept a lot of it up.
Yes, the ski
in LA.
Jump. Yep.
But yeah, it's crazy. BTK, Antifa, BLM are unemployed. Who pays them to riot? There's a lot of money questions that go.
Well,
on.
You don't have to be paid to riot. If you love rioting, you do it from the depths of your heart.
That's true, but there is some buses that show up to help them travel. Sometimes.
Yeah.
A little. My mama grew up in Quitman and lived for a time in the Miltier.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the Miltier Mansion. Miltier had money from before he got involved in this JFK thing. He had inherited money, Miltier.
Yeah. Money from Australia. How about a Chappaquiddick episode? I don't think that's on the
there's already a movie. I mean, there's a regularly great movie I'd recommend called Chappaquiddick. It's been thoroughly explored in that movie. It's a feature film with some Australian actors. You may want to take a look at it. It's got some Australian stars in it, playing specifically Ted Kennedy. The actor's an Australian for you cats down under there.
True. Now, you know who's a fan of McKinley, right?
Who?
The poor Patsy here.
Is that true?
Yeah, of course. Because he feels like, he's a victim. McKinley's a victim. Big fan.
It's a victim mentality, I got to tell you.
I'm telling you. And folks, you can always get an Oswald of your own, or you can get the Gros Bear.
The Gros Bear is good. Or the glasses when she gets it back.
Go ahead and order. She should have them any day to fulfill.
And what about the cards? When are the cards going to be ready?
Cards are well underway. We should be shipping hopefully later this month, early next month.
Talking about the JFK assassination card series, right? Okay.
Yes. I have I don't know. We probably have about 5 to 10 of them finished, front, back, descriptions, everything. The descriptions are done on over 20, and the art is done, but they're getting refined, etc. And we've got to make sure we're sourcing it correctly.
Good gift for Thanksgiving, folks. Let me just tell you, Thanksgiving is the 60th Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, that period of time, is the 60th anniversary of the assassination. So if somebody you know follows it or follows the show, it might be a good gift. Right. Sure.
And if you want, go to Locals. You can follow us for free. There's a couple of the cards I posted up there so people can see what they look like. Again,
how'd you like the price of that Kindle book I sent you?
Oh, good God!
It was $112. A book on McKinley, right?
Yeah, it was $101 for the hardcover.
Right.
And so then you think, okay, well, that's a lot of money for a hardcover. I'll just get the Kindle version. What is that going to be? 10 to 20? No, right. 115. And by the way, Mark, I went looking. It's Barnes and Noble ebook.
I know.
115.
This is my life, Hunley. This is what I do all day and night, is look at these books. I have a heart attack that I can't afford them. And people give some money through Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal for the book fund. But these books, these prices are insane. $112 for, a book like the McKinley book. And
why?
Why is the Kindle 112? I didn't understand how.
That
how
right
does
there
that
tells
happen?
me that tells me right there this bullshit, because
right.
I get it if this book went out of print 20 years ago and there's just not many copies out there. Okay, well, it's going to gain value.
Right.
But if it's already in a Kindle format, bits are damn near free.
Well, these bits aren't free. I'll tell you that much.
No, it's.
Let me ask you something. What do you like better, Del Taco or Taco Bell?
I don't know.
I've heard both. I don't really.
I
like Del Taco better than Taco Bell.
I don't really have a preference on that.
Okay. I mean, you're from Arizona. I think that when I was in Arizona, there was a lot of Del
Taco.
Taco.
But they're both bullshit. I mean, so it's
you're going to denounce them both. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, I'm just saying they're more.
What about McDonald's versus Burger King?
I like them both. My wife despises McDonald's. I'm fine with McDonald's.
Right.
But I don't know.
Okay. Well, this is really working out well.
Yeah. So, don't like Wendy's and don't care for Hardee's.
Well, Hardee's, I don't even see that out here that much.
Well, that's Carl's Jr. out there.
We have Carl's Jr. and In-N-Out Burger, and Fat Burger is my favorite. Fat Burger really dominates the earth for me.
Okay. Well, if anybody's out this way, we just discovered Smash Burger.
Smash Burger, I never heard of that.
They're excellent. And by the way, Five Guys sucks. That's my controversial thing of the evening.
Wow. Hunley going full Monty on this one. Now, where are we in this subscriptions? Are we like 81 or something? Or
no, 83 and change.
So we need 17,000 subscriptions to get the golden button or whatever they give us. What do they
Silver.
Give us? Is it silver?
It's silver standard, yes. The silver play button. Gold is 1 million. I won't turn away 1 million if people want to go nuts and really bug people. But
wait, what do we get at 100? We get something though, right?
We get a silver play button.
All right, that's all I want. That's all I ask for. Yeah. I'll never bring it up again until we're at like 900,000.
Oh, I'll bring it up again. I'm not gonna.
That's on you.
I won't do it so often.
So Friday, we're going to go over all these news events that have happened this week. And I'll touch on it today because I had a pretty big show today with this story. But Friday, we'll go over some of this crap, right?
Yeah, there's plenty to go over, and we will save it till then. But it is insane.
Right,
very busy show on Friday.
I think Wednesday, Hunley and I are doing this guy's show, Jose Vega's show, who's a guest on our show, and that could be interesting.
Yeah, I'll put a link to it on Locals, and I'm sure we'll tweet it out as soon as we know where or what. I don't know the format, and I'm supposed to be on a podcast, I guess, Wednesday tomorrow at 4. I don't know the details on that. I don't know when it's published.
That was helpful.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I will share it out. Once I know it, I will share it.
We're trying to have this meetup in Montgomery, Alabama. I'll shout it out again. I don't know if it's going to pull it off, but we're trying to pull it off. Labor Day weekend. This is June, so we got a little time to figure it out. I looked at a couple of sports bars, and there are some places down there, and we're dealing with Greg. The radio guy, Greg Budell from Montgomery, who can help us, I think, as a guy on the ground, put this together. So there is some way we're going to have a meetup, and I think that might be the right place and the right time.
And we will push as quickly as we can, because we understand that if you have to take time off or travel, things like that, more advanced notice.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it now. Because I need it. I like to know in advance anyway for that crap. And if I could drive, I would drive. I'll tell you that much, because this plane thing is getting crazy. But it's I guess you could fly to Atlanta is the way I looked at it. If you're coming from out here, Atlanta's the hub, and then you could drive from Atlanta, right?
About an hour.
Okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna go LA to Atlanta then, which I've done a million times. So that's not bad. Get a car and go down there.
All right. Well,
get a car in Atlanta and then drive to Montgomery.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And on that note, hope to see everybody on Locals. There's a lot of activity there. You can follow us both on
follow
Twitter.
on Twitter. Yeah, at Lord Buckley. If you want to get blocked at some point, it'd be a great honor.
Always follow, never interact. That's the safest.
Yeah, I
bet.
just follow. Don't get involved. I mean, I try. I don't even want to interact with anybody. I mean, it's just.
We'll see everybody Friday.
See you Friday.